For those of you who I don't know, my name is Chloe, and I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Vouchsafe. And I'm here with Jay, who is the other co-founder and our CTO. And yeah, like I said, it's great to see so many of you here. And I hope you're all doing well. I know that in some places, we're well into the summer holidays, and in other places, we've sort of only just started them. So I hope everybody's, sane and healthy. Today, we're going to talk about a few things, but there's been a lot of updates in the world of Vouchsafe in the last few months. So we thought we'd take some time today to talk about it, talk about what's been going on, talk more in depth about our work. And we're going to start by talking about the state of scams and fraud in the wider world, especially identity fraud, and how credit unions have been experiencing these problems. I say credit unions, I'm not talking broadly about all of you. I mean specifically the ones that we work with, what we've been seeing. Especially in identity fraud, how AI is sort of changing things, making it easier for people to fabricate things. We will also sort of reintroduce the Vouchsafe platform and show how it can help you get to grips with even quite sophisticated kinds of fraud and help remove those barriers to growing your membership. We'll also be talking about a new case study which will be about our work with London Mutual Credit Union. So that fab team have been using Vouchsafe for over 3 months now. I think it might be nearly 4 months now, and the results have been really encouraging. There will also be loads of time to ask questions, so please feel free to drop them into the chat beforehand, just as we go. But yeah, we collected a few beforehand over email as well. But yeah, type them in as you go, and I will be looking at that whilst Jay is presenting. So on that note, to get us started, I'm going to hand right over to you, Jay.
Yeah, hello everyone, I'm Jay. So we had the privilege of going to Money 2020 in Amsterdam a few months ago and seeing what the world's financial services industry is talking about. And there are 3 things very high on the agenda. New kinds of fraud enabled by generative AI, especially document fraud, causing lots of worry. Financial inclusion becoming a normal part of the conversation and no longer treated as a separate thing. And as strong identity verification becomes table stakes for pretty much every firm, attention is now starting to be drawn to the problem of ID poverty, the large numbers of people who struggle to access important services because they don't have standard photo ID or a strong UK data trail. So let's talk about these in turn. That first trend, fraud. The majority of all fraud now reported to CIFAS is identity fraud, so 59%. And that's either people using stolen or made up identities to apply for things they aren't entitled to. And this is increasingly enabled by generative AI to fabricate fake passports, driving licenses, utility bills, bank statements, to pretend that they are someone they're not, or to live somewhere that they don't live. So often these are too difficult to spot with the naked eye anymore, and there's a limit to how good technology can get at detecting them. AI is making fraud look different. Attacks can involve generated faces, voices, messages, and documents. The attacks are also getting more common. And crucially, it used to be that for a sophisticated, clever attack, the target needed to be a big, juicy enterprise. But with agents doing the legwork, smaller organizations are now equally at risk. On financial inclusion and ID poverty, you might already be aware that there are about 11 million Brits who don't have either a passport or a driving license. And this is a pretty good measure of ID poverty, and it's the one that we use at Vouchsafe. We use it instead of the much smaller 4 million who have no photo ID at all, or the number of thin file customers with the bureaus, or the just under 1 million who don't have a bank account. We think that this 11 million number is the best measure because if you're in that group, you will tend to find it very hard to prove who you are. even if that isn't the specific mechanism that's being used. So what unites all of these trends? Well, credit unions are on the frontier for all three of these issues. Members without good photo ID is, I'm sure, not a new problem for anyone here. And Vouchsafe now works quite extensively with the credit union movement, and we're proud to call some of the biggest in the country, like London Mutual, the one that we're here to talk about today, our customers. And specifically here in the UK, there's a fourth trend to be aware of, which is that there are now new regulations that we all need to follow when verifying identity. There's a new set of rules called the Digital Verification Services Trust Framework, the DVSTF, which the regulator Ofdia certifies companies that provide verification technology against. The government has made it clear, as of a few months ago, that regulated firms, including credit unions, really should be using a certified provider for things like KYC and AML checks. And many of the providers currently in use, things like Jumio and TransUnion, are not presently certified to this framework. So we expect that we will see a big move over the coming months as the sector moves to certified providers, either to stay compliant or simply to get a rising fraud rate under control through all of the trends that we've just spoken about. So at this point, I'd like to properly reintroduce Vouchsafe and explain what it is that we do. We're a fraud intelligence network. It's essentially a simple tool that you can use to understand the fraud risk that a member represents, either when they join, when they apply for a new product, or do anything else risky like come back after a period of dormancy. Unlike the other fraud consortia out there, and there are some, we work in real time. So if we detect an anomaly or get a fraud report from someone, everyone else gets instant protection. The platform does three things. Firstly, we have the risk product, which runs checks against our own data, as well as partner data like CIFAS and other fraud databases, multi-bureau credit file data, and online footprints based on email addresses and phone numbers. You send the details that you have, either by just typing them in or using an integration with your core banking system, and we'll return an instant fraud score and a recommendation of what to do next. So if there are fraud reports that someone has filed against that identity, or if we have detected unusual velocity or mismatches that might indicate either a stolen or a made-up identity, then it lowers that score. And you can then use our Verify product to collect evidence and make sure a member is who they say they are. This is the one that most of you will be already most familiar with. We do it differently to other providers, and increasingly so, because we focus on digital evidence, things like e-visas and bank accounts, as well as official data, not photo ID or utility bill scans. And that makes it essentially immune to document fraud and way easier for the member because they can do everything on their phone. They don't need to go hunting around for the right lighting and, making sure that their phone has a good enough camera and so on. But of course, if someone doesn't have the right evidence, we don't turn them away either. We let people prove who they are with a trusted referee, the thing that gave us our name. So we essentially can make a credible claim to being the only way that you can feasibly verify everyone who comes to you. And once Vouchsafe knows about a member, we can proactively monitor those details for you. So if we spot something risky later or get a fraud report from another credit union member, we instantly alert you. Being able to do this sort of thing using data and digital evidence to find out who people are means we can start to revisit some old ideas. You might have heard people talk about access and security or compliance and inclusion as though they are trade-offs, as if by making something more inclusive or accessible, you intrinsically make it less safe. Well, I am here today to tell you that this is an absolute fiction. This may have once been true, but with how fast things are now changing in the fraud world, if someone tells you this today, I'd like to put to you that they are just admitting that their technology isn't good enough to do both. And it's more than that, because this is essentially admitting that security was never genuine anyway. The only way that you could create a sense of being secure is by making it as hard as possible to get through the cracks. I want to put to you that this is a really poisonous idea that has no place in our conversations anymore. We'll come back to this. We believe this so strongly that we've just relaunched our whole platform to prove it. Vouchsafe used to let people prove who they are with paper documents like birth certificates and adoption paperwork, say. But something we noticed after doing it for a while is that if we offered that option alongside using a referee, which is fully digital, the member often picks the birth certificate because it's familiar, but they will succeed more often with a referee. We think this is because if you don't have good identity evidence, you might be disadvantaged in other ways. You might not have the latest phone, or you might have poorer digital skills. So passing all the hard bits to the referee makes sense. And with our relaunch, which we called Project Callio, we got rid of all of those old-fashioned ways to prove who you are and focused only on the wholly digital ways. I've got a case study to share with you now that charts a path through all of this complexity that we've been talking about, and it shows what the best practice can look like when it's done today. How do you use the new opportunities of the counter-fraud world to make the administrative bits of a member journey as simple as possible, and also give a big boost to security at the same time? We've been working with London Mutual Credit Union since the start of this year to help them safely onboard more members, and we now have some really promising preliminary results to share with you all. So if you don't know, London Mutual serves about 42,000 members across the boroughs of Southwark, Lambeth, Westminster and Camden, as well as those working for large employers like the NHS, TfL and a lot of local authorities too. So a pretty extensive common bond. The challenge is pretty classic with these three related problems to solve. Firstly, increasing member acceptance rate. So of the people who come to you, how many end up being members versus being turned away or dropping out during the process. Secondly, reducing document fraud. So the number of fake documents being accepted or fake evidence in general. And to reduce manual effort, as London Mutual, like many credit unions, is on the journey to fully automated lending decisions. So they're working with Vouchsafe to do three things aligned to each of those challenges. First, get an instant fraud risk score up front based on the information that the member gives, like their name, address, email address, phone number, and so on. Like you saw earlier, this can be done completely in the background without the member needing to do anything or provide anything. If that risk is raised, then we verify the member's identity, ideally with digital evidence, but falling back to photo ID and other things if needed. We do the same thing with address, checking credit files and other official databases first, and only fall back to asking for paper documents when we absolutely have to. And finally, we proactively monitor for any change in risk level over time. Vouchsafe works with a good portion of the credit union movement now, so if an identity starts behaving like it's been stolen or someone tells us that it has been, we can warn other customers about it in real time. So here's how it works under the hood. When the member joins, London Mutual uses our risk API to get an instant picture of the fraud risk. And they also choose to search official data, including our multi-bureau data coverage at this step, to find official authoritative traces of the identity and address existing in the world. This means that if all these checks come back with a low score, this is sometimes enough for a compliant onboarding all by itself, according to FCA and other regulations. But if there are insufficient traces of that identity in the official data sources or one or more fraud signals, they will then move on to using our Verify product to check the member's identity. And we will always prioritize digital evidence like an e-visa. Of course, in London, there's quite a high frequency of people with e-visas. There's about 4 million in the UK as a whole. And today there's a fallback to photo IDs in the mix, but honestly, we're very keen to remove this as soon as we can in favor of easier, safer techniques. And of course, there's our classic inclusive fallback to a trusted referee as well, for those who would really struggle otherwise. And we envision that this will always be in there, even 10 years on from today, because there will always be people who struggle with this process for one reason or another. And of course, we verify address as well. Again, aiming to do so with official data first, and only falling back to a supporting document like a bank statement or utility bill if we absolutely have to. Now, that's a lot. That's quite a complicated diagram, but it's important to stress that London Mutual doesn't need to orchestrate any of this. It all happens inside the Vouchsafe platform encapsulated. And Vouchsafe is basically following a simple, easy to understand principle, which is that in a given situation, it will always just do the easiest, safest thing that it possibly can to get the member through. And in terms of the results, we actually show key stats on the dashboard now for every customer, so they have full visibility of the value that they're getting. There's things like the completed count, the auto verification rate, and the median completion time as well, and I'll explain these as we go. So 3,200 new members onboarded in 4 months. That's about a 10% annual growth rate, which will make up half of that like double membership by 2030 goal all by itself, which we're really pleased with. And over 90% automatically verified with no manual intervention. That's no inspecting of documents, no like manual data lookups, nothing, completely automatic. The median time to get through verification, it's actually gone down. This was 2 minutes. We've gotten it down to 1 minute 10 now, which is an order of magnitude less than if we had members like futzing about with taking pictures of driving licenses or finding PDFs of their bank statements to share. So if we assume roughly like a sort of £100 annual value for each member, that's about 1.5 million in extra total member lifetime value, assuming about a 5-year engagement. So obviously these are sort of very vague numbers, but you can get a picture of the value we've been able to deliver in just 3 months. These are pretty encouraging results, but there is a lot more to be done, especially with the opportunities and the trends that we spoke about at the start coming through this year to get them moving even further in the right direction. Here's a few of them. First, if you have a complete picture of risk, credit and fraud, then you can start properly automating lending decisions. London Mutual is now in the position where a lot more is possible here. Don't forget that a lot of members still only require you, a lot of lenders, sorry, still only require you to type some details and with no impersonation check and just accept a great deal of identity risk as a result. So the lower that risk is, the more you can safely automate. Second, moving over historic accounts for transaction monitoring, because as a data sharing network, as an intelligence network, the more records you check against us, the more you benefit from the protection. And the standing membership of London Mutual is, of course, much larger than even the cumulative new joiners since the case study started. And we're also looking at a better hit rate with official data. So those multi-bureau data checks, how can we add even more data sources there, checking even more bureaus for the same cost that it would normally be to check like one, so that we stand the best possible chance of verifying someone without having to fall back on paper documents. So if we return to this message for a moment, as we've devised this work that we've shown you today, we've invariably found that every technique that we might employ to make the process safer also makes it easier. So I would suggest to you all now that this is the year to revisit this statement and eject it from your thinking and your strategies. Chloe.
Hello. Well, that was, yeah, super professional of me. I was just saying, thank you, Susie. I was just saying, we've had some questions emailed in, but before I get to those, I mean, I can start with those, but does anybody want to dive right in with any questions that they've got? Just put your hand up. Am I still on mute? No, okay, cool. Just nobody wants to put their hand up. Yeah, so there's sort of been a change in how we talk about what we're doing, and I think the question that one of the questions I've got is how exactly does this fraud intelligence network work? How do you use it? And if someone else, one of our sort of other than you, if someone else reports fraud and you also have that person as a member, what happens? So I think
yeah, okay. So I think the first thing to understand is that Vouchsafe is not the only fraud intelligence network out there, but because we're not the only one, we can look at what the others have done and try and fix the problems that they have. So one of the problems that you always have with this stuff is the barrier to reporting. Obviously, a shared data sharing network that keeps everyone safe only works if people report fraud, right? And if that's a thing that you have to remember to do and that can be quite tricky and slow to get done, inevitably it just won't get done as often as it should. So Vouchsafe doesn't let you like access the data sharing network directly. You do it through the things that you would normally do as a credit union. So onboarding new members, monitoring risky transactions. If you call the API during those normal things, Vouchsafe, that is the reporting mechanism essentially. So that is in the background silently improving the data quality and helping keep everyone safe. You can, of course, block people who you have determined later to be fraudsters or scammers through something that Vouchsafe can't see. So like, let's say that they are that person, but they, go to use the account to launder money or something. You can block that person and we can use their biometrics, for example, to make sure that you and every other credit union in the network will never see that scammer again. And those are also really helpful signals to the network. So that's essentially our version of a reporting mechanism. There's no need to like fill in a big long form that gives us a bunch of information for the first time because it's kind of already in the platform. So we try to make it as simple and as easy as possible to do the reporting part and keep everyone safe transparently without having to put an extra burden on your own team to remember to do this extra thing. Did that answer the question? Was there a second half?
I guess it would, yeah, what happens if I also have that member? And I guess the answer to that is just that we will proactively alert you.
Yeah. So it depends how the person was blocked or exactly what has happened in the background. But there's essentially two things. There's like a sort of hard block and a soft block. So if someone has been verified with like a video selfie and we have their biometrics on file and you block that person, then that's a really, really strong piece of evidence. So Vouchsafe will essentially reject that person if we see them again without you ever seeing them. And
if they're already a member,
you'll get an alert, which at the most basic level can be just an email that you get. But it can also come via an integration into your platforms that you already use as well. So, for example, we do this with Incuto. Does that answer the question?
I think so.
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions at all? No? Great. I will have a look at what the list was. So yeah, if it's so easy to impersonate people, why would I ever pass them from just a data check? Shouldn't I always ask for upfront evidence?
Yeah, this is a good question. So in the slides, here we are. There. We spoke about how London Mutual is using our risk API up front, and if that returns a good enough result, they're passing people directly rather than asking for evidence from them. So this kind of depends a little bit on your risk appetite and the kind of fraud patterns that you see as an organization. This can be a fully compliant way to do it, and in fact, like many people do. But I would contend that the reason that London Mutual can still do this in this day and age, even though it is so difficult to impersonate people now, is because of the network protection, not because of the fact that they're checking those details against a credit file or something. That extra real-time protection means that if there is a sort of fraud signal, then they will hear about it instantly. Whereas with a normal credit file lookup, that can take like 30 to 60 days to get updated. So it's just way slower. So that reduces the risk and means that they can still just about get away with this today. Who knows, in a few years, AI fraud might get even worse, and we might move to a system where everyone needs to give like an e-visa or a bank account or some other kind of digital evidence to prove that they really are who they say they are at onboarding. But this is a workable system today that's returning really good results for them, as you've seen.
And then the final one I've got here is, can it just be used standalone? Oh, Suzanne, you go ahead, please.
I was just going to ask a question. So obviously there's been, we work with Circle system and we work with Incuto. And obviously there's been changes in the background of them coming together. And I don't know how to do this technology-wise, Jay. So, you know, is there any benefits for your system to integrate with this? You had said previously that there's a good link up that you have with Incuto. Is there any other things that you think are in the pipeline for the future that this?
Yeah, we really like the Incuto people, as people who've attended previous webinars with them will know. And we have a pretty good relationship with them. We're always looking at making that integration more fully functional. It basically does everything that you'd need today, though, to be honest, because you've got little triggers in the Incuto platform, and you can choose to send someone through a Vouchsafe check when they join or when they apply for a new loan or any other trigger that you would want, really. And so the only thing missing from that integration that we would look to add in future is the risk API, which, as you've seen in this webinar, is like relatively new for us. So it makes sense that it wouldn't be in there yet. So there's obviously a lot more points during the member life cycle where you might want to make a risk assessment of what they're doing and like see if you should do extra checks on them. And yeah, we'll probably be making improvements there very soon to make that easier for people. But I would say it's perfectly serviceable today. Lots of people use it like that as it is.
Cool.
Does that answer the question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay.
And it kind of feeds into the question that I got in advance, which is, can it be used standalone?
Yeah, you certainly can. So I showed this picture back here. This one. So like Vouchsafe has its own UI that you can just use directly if you want. So we get a lot of people who use it as an investigative tool, the risk bit, where you are literally just typing the members' details, and you can do this like by hand if you want to. It's obviously not real time if you do it that way because you need to do the typing. So it's always better when it's integrated. But if you're just getting started or you're just curious, then it's often a good idea to just like play about with it and see what kind of results you get back. We find that people really like the online footprint bit, especially because a very common kind of fraud that we see these days is people making fake email addresses to defraud you. And the online footprint check can like stop that stone dead because it will just tell you how old the email address is and what it's connected to, and even find like names and other accounts that it's been used with in the past. And it all factors into the overall risk score. Cool. Any more questions? Okay.
That might be everything.
That might be everything. I take it that everything was very clear then.
I hope so, yeah. And if you've got any if you want to go back to the question slide, if you have got any questions or thoughts at the end, you can whiz us an email, or yeah, if you're a LinkedIn kind of person, then you can get us on there as well. But yeah, it's sort of lots of changes, but changes that we still do everything that we used to do, but now we've got this added benefit, and it's one that sort of as we, I don't know if you can chop this out the recording, but as we grow and as we've got sort of some different financial institutions that are coming on board, you'll, as credit unions, this is the little piece de la resistance in my mind, you'll benefit from their fraud reporting. And you know, there's no like membership fee, there's no sort of loads of research and evidence and investigation that you have to do to benefit from their knowledge. And I think that for me is sort of the beating heart of it, really, is that everyone can benefit from those much from different organizations. And yeah, it's when we launched it in trial in January, we've seen some really positive results. So yeah, it's all about getting the right people through, even if they're in really tough circumstances in life, and stopping the ones that are, you know, making a conscious effort to try and defraud financial institutions, especially the best ones, which in my opinion are credit unions. There is a question around pricing models. Do you want to take that one?
Sure, yeah. It's quite simple, Ravi. There's two plans. There's a light plan, which gives you like the identity and address verification, but not the headline risk API. The light plan is $39 a month. The flex plan is $399 a month.
Yeah, we, Ravi, I don't know where you're from, but depending on your numbers as well, and this goes for everyone, we can have a conversation about it, because I know that for some credit unions, it's a case of the numbers coming through and how many checks they want to do and how frequently they want to do them. I mean, with us as well, if you're doing regular, and everyone should be doing regular AML checks, but that's included. And for every person that you run through it, we will check them every day against the AML databases and let you know if anything changes as well. But yeah, that's sort of it in a nutshell. You're welcome. Anybody else? Any other questions? Think that might be it. Might be time to wrap that up. Right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We will get a recording out. So for those of you who've had problems with sound, etc., you'll get to watch us in 2x speed when we send that to you. And yeah, I hope you all have lovely afternoons. Enjoy your Monday. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we will see you very soon.